Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by three Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation.
Well, hello, everybody. Ladies, so good to see you again. Well, today we're going to deal with something I think that, first of all, is universal, it seems, right now, or at least a universal need for it. But I'll preface it by, I just finished an article in the Harvard School of Public Health magazine that comes out. And this author talks about the age of trauma. Saying that the last 5 years or so, and now we all know this, but let's put it into perspective. We have been dealing with things that are almost a once in a lifetime type of things all together. You know, so there's the pandemic, of course, the escalating gun violence, the political dialogue that's going on, and the divisiveness that is throughout society. Very vitriolic, very strong divisiveness. You know, it's the you they thing. We're also talking about, climate, of course, is still there, and an opioid epidemic. I mean, that's just a few of the things we're dealing with. We just saw that the average life expectancy went down significantly over these last few years because of the COVID, the pandemic, and the opioid crisis. So, I mean, let's face it, our society is in upheaval. And his point is that this is the age of trauma. This is very traumatic for all of us. Okay, now we're always, as individuals, going through what's in our head, struggling what's in our head, and that monkey mind and all the things that we struggle with. And the last thing we should be doing now, I think, is to make things worse by not having our stuff together. I mean, we never really do, but at least being able to go in a direction where we can manage, continue to navigate the world, and hopefully grow even during this time of trauma. So, I mean, it's almost like post-traumatic stress syndrome, except we're still in the middle of all of this trauma. How do we maneuver through all of that? So that's what we want to talk about. That's a huge slice, ladies, but I rely on both of you as certified coaches and what you do every day to help me. And I will ask questions occasionally that I think represent what the average person, I tend to be an average person, would ask, and so to make sure that we provide them what they need. But okay, so that's it. We're in a time of upheaval, a time of trauma. How can we make ourselves, our head, our emotions, how can we put them and get them in a place where we can continue to navigate this world, stay sane, stay upbeat, and grow during all of this time? Teresa, what do you think?
Absolutely. There's so much going on in the world, and those are factual things that are absolutely going on in the world. And then our mind just goes swirling, right? We have this constant input of things that seem wildly out of control, and certainly are out of our control. And then our brains just go swirling and try to interpret it, try to make sense of it, try to, in some ways, control it. So there's so much that happens in our brains, right? And it feels like, truly the human brain, they think, has about 60,000 thoughts a day. So that is a lot of thoughts. And then there's a lot going on in the world. So there's so much happening inside our brain, and it can be disorienting and confusing and overwhelming and frustrating, just to name a few. And so my approach is always to have people write down what are the thoughts that are happening in your mind, right? Let's get them all on paper. And very, very often it's surprising. There's usually not more than 10 thoughts that are spinning, that the record is spinning currently, right? So we get them on paper. That's step one.
Might be an example of one, Teresa.
An example.
What could you give me an example of what one of those might be?
Absolutely. It could be a fear-based thought of getting COVID. It could be just the overwhelm of there's so much political divide in our country, and there's nothing I can do about it, right? It could be any of those types of thoughts.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Our brains also like to pose questions. It's almost taunting that brains like to taunt us with questions, and they're usually terrible questions that there is no possible good answer. Like, the planet's going to hell. What are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? That's a terrible question to ask, right? So whenever our brain is posing questions, it's good to turn those into a sentence, right? Take the question mark off, make it into a sentence, and that's how you find the underlying thought. But step one, be a better eavesdropper on what your brain is offering you. Almost shift into the role of a court reporter. Just get it documented. Step one, you have no opinion. You're not judging it. Just document it. See what your brain is actually doing.
It's almost like from a wrangler's metaphor, throwing a rope around a thought. When it's just rattling around in your brain, it just keeps coming back. It's like a big backpack that you carry with you. But when you write it down, I would think that is a process of making it real, making it tangible. And as I said, throwing a rope around it. And I could see that as being not necessarily cathartic, but at least, to sort of calm you down a little bit, and start to look at these as tangible things and that I have to manage. So I like that.
Absolutely.
Danielle, what do you think?
I love that. And there's so much evidence to support narrative writing and journaling just as a form of therapy to get it out of your system. And it is interesting that people start to see patterns like Teresa had mentioned, where it's the same stuff cycling over and over again. And I think this is a really good approach once you do that, to kind of start looking at what those questions are and asking yourself, is that true? The thing that comes up a lot for me are not even specific things about necessarily COVID, or am I going to keep my job or lose my job? They're things like, am I worthwhile as a person?
Mm-hmm.
Like getting to the real core of the value people place on themselves, or if they're changing jobs, who am I to be thinking that I can step into this role? So that people are having a lot of big thoughts. And as Teresa mentioned, not necessarily helpful thoughts. So I think looking at them and just asking, is that true? And one of the indicators that I like to use is if you find yourself saying, this person always does this, or I can't possibly do that. I'm too stupid to learn computers, or I can't do that. Whenever there's an absolute, that's the time to ask, is that true? What else might be true? And what could I do if that weren't true? And it's kind of almost playing the devil's advocate on your thoughts and challenging them.
Absolutely. The first question is it true? And the second question is it serving me? Is that thought serving me? And I mean, if thoughts are always available to us, and there's an infinite number of thoughts available to us, we should probably go ahead and think the ones that are both true and that serve us. Why not?
I may be jumping ahead here, and tell me if I am, but I'm thinking of Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. And this particular thing I'm going to say was really about stress. But let's face it, this is what trauma and our reaction to it is. It's a very stressful. So he says there's only three things you can really do when you have a stressful thing. And again, I may be jumping ahead, but you'll manage it. Is to fix it, or to make a plan to fix it. So I would think in this situation, are you saying, is this something I can do to fix? Can I fix this really? And if I can, then what is it that I should do? And the second thing is to just walk away from it, to decide that is not something that should even be in my head. It is nothing I can do about it. And that's just it. And that's the third one, is to accept it as the reality. And okay, we're in a very traumatic time, and I have to accept that and move on with my life. Navigate, grow, be, as Gandhi says, be the example of what you want the world to be. That sort of thing. What do you think?
Yeah, those are three different types of thoughts that a person could choose. And the question is, what feels the most true for you and what would serve you the best? One of those three different types of thoughts that absolutely you could think instead, right? Think intentionally, to think on purpose. It always has to be true. We're not talking unicorns and rainbows here. We're talking true thoughts that do serve you. And one of those 3 types of thoughts that you just mentioned absolutely would be true for the person and probably would serve them very well, much better than the original thought.
Yeah. And I like that idea too of what thoughts are not helpful and looking at them with like healthy skepticism. It's not saying that you should be, if you find yourself being overly negative or overly positive, that could be a problem. Not that positive is necessarily bad, but if you're like, it's going to be great and you're not feeling it, then you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment. So a healthy skepticism, looking both sides of the issue and just being able to say, okay, this is the situation. As you mentioned, Roger, what can I change? What's in my control? And sometimes it's just how you look at something. It's your thought about it versus the actual action. What can't I control? What am I going to accept? And what am I going to say, no, thank you? And sometimes that no, thank you and walking away might be changing a thought. It could actually be physically leaving people in situations that are unhealthy. So you're not jumping ahead, but it's such a big, big topic.
Masterpiece provides communities with personalized content that keeps residents engaged and focused on their unique pathway to healthy longevity, no matter the circumstance or external influence. Powered by Masterpiece provides communities with the data and research needed to drive both the resident and community forward. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
I don't want to do it again, but I can imagine someone saying, listening to this, I'm on social media all the time and I'm on the internet all the time and I'm hearing all this stuff, some of which I'm finding out isn't true. Some is true. I don't know what's true. And it's really making me crazy,
Mm-hmm.
So I know that's a more tangible thing than what we're talking about, but it seems to me it has to be part of this picture if that's feeding the beast, so to speak.
Absolutely. Well, our diet is not just what we eat, but it's what we allow to be inputted into our lives and our brains. And we've got to change the channel. Notice what channel you're dialed into, literally and figuratively. And is that channel serving you? At least give equal airtime, to a different channel. So that might be literally changing the channel on social media or the TV, but it could be changing the channel in your own brain. We have about an 80% negativity bias, the research is showing. So, and that's our primitive brain doing its job. Like, is to a point you've made many times before, Roger, is that a rock in the grass or a snake? Better to assume it's a snake because, that's the safer option. So the brain is going to choose a negativity bias. That's its job, to keep us alive, right? So just know that 80% of the thoughts that you download could very likely be negative if you have a normal human brain, and that's okay. And then intentionally change that channel and at least give equal airtime to what is right, what is going well, things that nourish you and nourish your mind.
Oh, I'd like to go in on that. And again, this is you mentioned, I think before, Danielle, what is true, and I think both of you have. And, I'm thinking what I do sometimes is when my mind is swirling and I just think, how can I get through all of this in society? I mean, not so much me and my day-to-day thing, but as a part of the species and a part of my family and the grandfather of my grandkids and the husband of my wife, all that. And so for me, if you can